Hey guys, how's it going? Hope everybody's doing well today. In this video, we're going to take a look at something that's been requested for more than a year, but I'm finally at a point where I feel like I'm comfortable in making this video. And in this video, we're going to take a look at setting up Authelia with NGINX Proxy Manager. So without any further ado, let's just jump into setting up Authelia with NGINX Proxy Manager using Docker and Portainer. Just a quick side note, actually, before we get started here, so we're not going to jump right into this, I suppose, is that in order for this to work, you'll need a Docker server, you'll need a domain name, you'll need NGINX Proxy Manager set up, and I'm going to use CloudFlare to manage my DNS and SSLs. So those are what we're going into this with a basic understanding of already. If you're not familiar with those things, I will try to remember to put links to everything in the description down below, where you can get caught up to speed with regards to those things. So with that ado out of the way, let's jump in. Okay, guys, so here we are on my desktop, and we're actually on Authelia's official GitHub page. We're actually scrolled about a third of the way down the page so that we can see kind of what Authelia does. Like it says, it's an open source authentication and authorization server providing two-factor authentication and single sign-on for your applications via a web portal. So basically what we're going to do, in fact, this is a good explanation, simplified in this little image right here. So we've got our end user out away from our server, and then we've got the internet, and then we've got Authelia here in the middle. Here it's showing it working with NGINX and traffic. This is NGINX, the server, not NGINX Proxy Manager. And then I'm not sure what this icon is, but it shows it working in conjunction with those things. Like those are between the internet and your server, and this is kind of saying, hey, we're gonna attach to those with Authelia for authentication. And of course, then we've got our server side applications here. We've got a couple of those. In fact, during this process, we're going to set up, well, we've got a couple of applications set up. If we jump over here to Portainer, you can see that we've got NGINX Proxy Manager. We've got our Flame dashboard. We've also got Snippet Box. We've done videos on both of those. We've taken a look at how to install those. So I thought those would be good applications to look at adding an extra layer of security to. So basically, we come back over here, we can see that this is basically what your sign-on page will look like right here. And then if you were to add basically a multi-factor authentication, whether it's through text messages or an authenticator, or like an authenticator app, or a software, a hardware key, like it says here, through like YubiKey or something like that. Those are all additional layers of security that you can add to Authelia. However, for the sake of this initial video, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do a very basic sign-on screen here, so that it just adds at least one more layer of protection against or for your applications against anybody trying to access them. So this is going to be kind of a multi-part thing. I don't know if I'm going to put chapters in this video because you kind of need to follow along instead of jumping around. I'll decide that later. But basically, the first thing that we need to do, if we actually come up here, we can take a look at their examples under here, under example/compose. There are a couple of options, whether it's light or local. And if you come in here and take a look at their Docker Compose, you can see that by default, they want you to use traffic for this. And traffic is great for a lot of things, but if you've got a setup like I do, and probably like a lot of you guys do out there as well, you've probably got multiple servers running, whether it's physical hardware, bare metal, or you've got multiple virtual machines, things like that. Traffic isn't a great thing to implement in those cases. My understanding of traffic is that basically all of your stuff has to be on one server because it requires labels to activate, and it's just a whole thing. So I like to use NGINX Proxy Manager for my reverse proxy. So what we're going to do is actually install Authelia to work with NGINX Proxy Manager. Okay, so here we are on my desktop. We're logged into Portainer, and here we can see that we've got Snippet Box up and running. We've got Flame dashboard up and running. We've got NGINX Proxy Manager, and of course, Portainer. Those are where we're going to start with this, because we've talked about basically all of these containers before. So, if we take a look over here, I open up port 5000. There is Snippet Box. If I go to here to 5005, there is Flame dashboard. Of course, there's a new version available. Don't care about that for the moment. What we do want to do, though, is come back over here to Portainer, and we're going to go over here to stacks. We're going to add a new stack here, and then I'm looking down because I've got another screen open down here for all of this stuff that I'm going to need to deploy this. You'll have access to this once the video goes live. Let me do this and go into here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to deploy our container here. Now I do want to change this volume. I'm going to mount this in home/Authelia. Of course, you can mount that wherever you need to on your system, depending on how your shares or how your system is set up. Make that volume relevant to your system. But above that, we can see that we've got a version 3.3, Docker Compose. Our service will be Authelia. We're using the official Authelia image there. We've got a container name. We've got our volume that we just talked about. We've got port 9091 on both sides of that for the internal and the external. If you need to change 9091, say you're already using it for something, change the first half that I've got highlighted there. Do not change the second half. Now, the other thing you got to keep in mind, if you're going to change that port, is there will be several things throughout the rest of this setup process that relies on that port. So if you change that 9091 here, you will need to remember to change that in other places later, or you will run into issues. So just something to keep in mind there that I wanted to bring up so I don't forget to bring it up later. And of course, below that, we've got our time zone for America/Denver. For me, of course, you'll want to change that to your locale. I'm going to put in a name there for the stack, and I'm going to scroll down and click on deploy the stack.
A few moments later.
Okay, so there we go. We've got Authelia all up and running. And if I click that, the container is stopped. And that's not typical of what we see when we're dealing with deploying containers, is to deploy something and have it immediately fail. So let's take a look at why it failed. So let's go and click here. Configuration did not exist, so a default one has been generated at /config/configuration.yml. You will need to configure this. So it actually stopped the container on purpose so that you'll have to go in and configure that file. So what we're going to do is actually come over here to our terminal. I'm going to close that one, and then holy cow, this is way too big. Let's bring this down, and we will see, even, holy cow, even there. All right, come on, there we go. Okay, so it says that our configuration has been generated at this location. So what we're going to do, we're going to do cd/home. Let me just do this and then do ls. And right there, we can see that we've got Authelia in there. So we're going to do cd into Authelia and then ls. And right there is our configuration file. Now, if we go in here and we do nano or vi, whatever your editor preference is, I'm going to do configuration.yml. Oops, this thing has got a lot of information in it that we're not going to use. So what I want to do is I'm actually just going to exit out of there, and I'm going to do cp configuration. Like so. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a backup file of, or a backup of this file rather. I'm going to do that. And if I do an ls, we can see that we've got configuration and configuration.bk. So I'm going to do an rm configuration like so. And then we'll do nano configuration like so. Now, here we have a blank slate with which to start. So what I've got down here, again, you'll have access to this configuration file as well. Everything will be linked in the description. What I'm going to do is just paste that in there. And then now we're going to go here and we're going to talk about this setup process. So we're going to go back up to the top. And so basically, first things first, we're going to decide, do we want a light theme or dark theme for our little login prompt? You can decide that right there. Your secret, this is just an encryption secret, so be sure to change this with a relevant JWT token. Just a string of characters, doesn't really matter what it is. So I forgot to mention this when I was recording the video, that this default redirection URL that's here that says https google.com, basically that is where you want to redirect people who are trying to access something that doesn't exist on your server. So I wouldn't make this, your personal self-hosted homepage. That's, I think, just a bad idea. I like to redirect to something innocuous like Google or Facebook or Twitter or something else that won't give any identifiers as to who this server belongs to. Below that, we've got our server, our host. If you want to bind this specifically to an IP address, you absolutely can. Leaving it as 0.0.0.0 is fine. However, for additional security, you probably should bind it. Below that, we've got port 9091. That was actually decided in our Docker Compose, our stack that we already deployed. If you changed it in your Docker Compose or your stack, you'll need to change it here as well, I believe. Then we're going to keep just scrolling down. All of this other stuff is fine. Our TOTP, basically our top level domain, we're going to change this. I will try to have this changed before this video goes live. But basically what we're going to do is dbtech.tips. This is going to be our top level domain for the sake of this tutorial. You'll want to change this to whatever your top level domain is for the domain that you'll be securing. So below this, we've got an authentication backend. Now, this is where you're going to store your users. So, and we'll get to this. We'll actually need to generate or create this file later, and we'll get to that. But this is where your users will be stored. This is the file that Authelia will authenticate against with your usernames and passwords and credentials that you give each of your individual users. Basically, we just leave all of this. We'll come back to that when we actually start generating users and that sort of thing. Below down here, we've got access control. There we go. So our default policy will be deny. And with the way permissions work in this kind of a situation, it goes kind of in order of operations. So if you were to put allow there, and then you were to say deny on everything else, it's just kind of you have to explicitly deny everything in that case. What we want to do is explicitly allow certain domains. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but we want to deny everything, but only explicitly allow the domains that we want access to via Authelia. So what you're going to do here is you're going to set up auth.yourdomain.com like it shows here. What I'm going to do is actually delete this, and I'm going to say dbtech.tips. I actually bought this domain recently specifically for this tutorial. And for the policy, we're actually just going to bypass authentication or bypass Authelia on this because we're going to use this for Authelia. This is where your URLs be redirected to in order to authenticate, have the server drop a domain cookie on your browser so that you'll then be able to gain access to the other domains that you're given permission to access. So below that, we're going to have additional domains that we want to give access to. So in this particular case, again, we're going to come back over here to Portainer for just a moment. We're going to take a look at our containers, and we've got snippet box and we've got flame. Those are the two that we're going to give access to for the sake of this tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to here. I'm going to change this to be, we'll say snippet.dbtech.tips. And then below that, we've got a policy, just where it says policy one factor. Now, if you had, let's say you set up, an email authentication system, or you set up, with an application to get a code generated for that, or you've got a YubiKey or something like that, you would change this policy to match that. However, we're not going to do that for the sake of this video. We're going to keep it very, very simple, just to give kind of an entry-level access to Authelia for the sake of this setup. So just one factor is fine. That's just going to be a username and a password that will have to be authenticated before they'll get access to the application itself. And that'll make more sense later if it doesn't already. Next, we've got another subdomain here. For this one, we're going to call this flame.dbtech.tips. Like so. Again, one-factor authentication, just an additional username and password to authenticate here. And these others are in here as an example where you can add as many subdomains as you'd like. And then below that, there's actually a wildcard with this asterisk right here. I don't recommend doing that. It's a security issue, again, because you're kind of overriding this deny that's up here by saying any subdomain under my primary domain is okay. We don't really want to do that, but I wanted to show that you could and bring that up because I'm sure somebody will say, well, can't I just allow anything? You absolutely can, but for security reasons, I don't advise it. I'd honestly advise explicitly allowing specific subdomains on an as-needed basis versus just allowing everything. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to come up here and I'm just going to delete all of those lines like so. So now we've got auth.dbtech.tips, we've got snippet.dbtech.tips, and we've got flame.dbtech.tips. So let's just pause this for a second, and let's go ahead and actually set up these domains over here in CloudFlare. So we've got our dbtech.tips as our primary domain, and you can see that I've got this blurred, but that's my home IP address. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up those three subdomains. We're going to click Add Record. We're going to come down here to CNAME. We're going to say auth, because we've got that as a domain name that we want. And we're just going to say @. So auth.dbtech dbtech.tips is an alias of this. So basically, if I ever change this IP address on my A record here, all of my CNAME records will automatically update to that IP address. Because we've already got our SSLs installed in NGINX Proxy Manager, we can leave this proxy status as proxied. If you don't have SSLs installed in NGINX Proxy Manager, you'll want to set this as DNS only, and then set up your SSLs. Once they're set up, you can come back and switch this to proxied. But I don't advise doing it that way anymore. Now that I've learned this other way of installing SSLs into our NGINX Proxy Manager, so I'm going to go ahead and click save. So I've got auth set up there. I'm going to also do another CNAME for flame at, just like we did a second ago, and then we'll do the same thing again for snippet and at, and save. And this way we've got all of our subdomains set up and ready to go when we get ready to go into NGINX Proxy Manager and set up all of our security. So there we go. Now we're back where we want to be. Okay, so our sessions, we can actually decide how long we want our sessions to last. You can set this, for an hour or for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, whatever. Just set this in seconds. I hate that it's in seconds, but it's in seconds. Pretty standard, really. And then inactivity, like if somebody's sitting there doing nothing, let's expire that cookie after 5 minutes. That's probably a reasonable thing to do there. Also, this will also be your top level domain. So we're going to do dbtech.tips. So it's important to understand something else here, that Authelia will only work with one domain. That is to say that if you've got multiple top-level domains that you want to secure with Authelia, you'll need to set up separate instances of Authelia for each of those different domains, because it generates a cookie based on the top-level domain. So if I were to have, dbtech.tips as my top level here, I couldn't then, with this setup, also secure with Authelia like dbtech.com. I can only secure dbtech.tips and all of its subdomains with this Authelia setup. So for each domain you want to secure, you'll need another instance of Authelia. It's just because of the way the cookies are generated for the URLs. It's just the way it's built. So below that, we've got regulations, how many retries, how many, basically you can, if somebody tries more than 3 times, they get banned for 12 hours. So you can kind of adjust how tight or loose you want those settings to be. Your storage here, now this is where all of your database entries are going to be stored. This is fine if it's just going to be you and a couple of people accessing your stuff. However, if you're going to be deploying this for a larger environment with lots and lots of users, I would absolutely consider replacing this with a MySQL database versus just using a db.sqlite 3 flat file. Just something to keep in mind. In a larger environment, a MySQL database will be beneficial for speed and that sort of thing. Disable, so basically we've got some notifiers down here. So basically what you'll want to do is come into here like so, and make sure that you fill in all of this information for your username, your password. I would just set up a Gmail account specifically for your hosting, your self-hosting, which is what I've done. But basically, you'll need to fill in your username, password, all of this information before you actually save and deploy Authelia. In this case, Authelia needs a notifier set up, and Gmail, in my opinion, just for a basic setup, is just kind of the go-to. You could absolutely set this up with any number of other authentication or notifier services, but again, for a simple setup, we're just going to use Gmail. So once you've got all of this taken care of, you can go ahead and press Control-O and Enter and Control-X, and that will save and exit that file. The other thing we need to do is create a user database. We're going to copy this. So basically, again, if I do just an ls in here, you can see that we've got our configuration.yml and the backup we made of the original. We also need to make a users underscore database.yml file like so. And we're just going to paste this in here. This is kind of the default setup here. This kind of just shows a couple of users and what that would look like. We're going to kind of run through this real quick, and then we'll actually go and set this up. So our users here is declared at the top. This is the section that we would be in. And you can see we've got user 1 and user 2. user 1 and user 2 would actually be their user names. So if we come up to here, like so, I might make my username dbtech, and then the display name again, might be just dbtech, like so. We're going to skip the password for just a moment. We're going to come back to that because there's a bit more involved in generating that password. So what we're going to do for the email address, we're going to delete this, and we're going to set this as david@dbtechreviews.com, like so. And then below that, we've got some groups. Groups will make sense later, but basically, you can put people into groups, and then in your configuration file, when you're setting up your domains, you can restrict access to certain domains by a group. So if you had a group of admins who only needed access to administrative containers or features on your network, you could add that to the authentication, and then only admins would be able to access that. Again, we're not getting into that level of authentication just yet, but it's there, and this is what it would look like for that setup process for a user. And then below that, of course, this is just to demonstrate that you could set up multiple users doing this process over and over and over again. Make sure that your spacing is consistent. Otherwise, it'll throw errors and it won't be happy. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of those. So now let's talk about this password situation here, where we've got this, $Argon2i, $V equals 19, whatever, right? So what we're going to do is actually generate that URL or that password. We're going to come over here. We're going to go to argon2.online, and then it's going to bring you here. And basically, what we're going to do is generate a password. Now, in the document or in the tutorial here, it shows what all your settings need to be, and I've got it written out as well. You'll have access to that again in the description. So our salt, what we're going to do is we're just going to push the gear right there and let it generate something. Our parallelism factor should be 8. Memory cost is at 1024. Iterations is 1. And hashtag, or hash length rather, is 32. And we want this to be an Argon 2 ID, like so. And then we'll type in just whatever our password should be. Of course, don't use password. This is just for me to demonstrate what's going on here. Once we've got all of these blocks filled out, we can just click on generate hash. And right here is set hash. So we can click copy right there. Then we can come back over to here. Oops. And then let's just delete all of this, like so. And then we're just going to paste that in, like so. And then once we're ready to do that, or once we're happy with this, we can just do Control O, Enter, Control X. So now we have set up our configuration as well as our users for this setup. So the next thing we want to do is actually go back to Portainer and redeploy our Authelia container. So if we come back over to here, we can still see that Authelia is stopped. So we're going to go ahead and just check the box and click Start. Hopefully, when this starts, we shouldn't have any issues. Let's go ahead and jump into here. It says it's listening, so that's good. That means that all of our settings were good to go. So what we can do, if we jump over to here, right there is our sign-in screen. So that's good. That means everything is working the way we want it to work. So now comes the setting up the authentication for each of our subdomains. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come back over to NGINX Proxy Manager. We're going to go to hosts. We're going to go to our proxy hosts. Here we can see we've got dbtech.com set up. That's just so that the website doesn't go down while I'm doing this tutorial. So if we come over to SSL certificates, we can see that I've got that dbtech and I've got dbtt for dbtech tips. So both of those are set up and running. So I'm going to go to hosts, I'm going to proxy hosts. I'm going to add a proxy host. So this is going to be auth.dbtech.tips. We're going to do 192.168.69.106, and then our port will be 9091. We're going to go ahead and check all of those boxes. And then for our SSL, we're going to come over to here. We're going to grab our dbtt or whatever your SSL is. Then we're just going to check all these boxes and click Save. And then we'll go ahead and click this. And again, that's good. That means everything is working the way we want it to. Authelia is up and running in this instance. So let's go back and let's set up our other domains. So we're going to have flame.dbtech.tips. Again, 192.168.69.106. And then let's see what port I had flame running on that was 5005. So again, 5005, and we'll check all these boxes. Go to SSL. Again, we're going to select our certificate, like so, and click Save. And then we're going to make sure that this one works. Same thing. All right, there's our Flame dashboard. Again, that's good. We want to make sure that all of these work before we start actually adding the security to them. So we're going to go ahead and come back, and we're going to add one more, which we called snippet. Snippet.dbtech.tips 192.168.69.106, and this was on 5005, I believe, for snippet. Nope, that was Flame, so 5000. I'm glad I double checked that. That would have been an issue. So we're going to come back over to NGINX Proxy Manager. We're going to call that port 5000. Oops. And again, we're going to check all the boxes. We're going to select our SSL. Oops, like so, and click Save. And then we're going to go ahead and check that as well. There's snippet box. There's nothing in there, but there's snippet box. The other thing that I do want to make a note of is once you've got your SSLs installed in NGINX Proxy Manager, like I've done here, you will want to come over to CloudFlare and go over to your SSL/TLS and make sure that your SSL TLS over here is set to strict, full, whatever. Make sure that this is your setting, just to make sure that you've got full encryption all the way through. So just a quick little side note there. So now we've got all of our proxy hosts set up. All of our domain names work. We've shown that. We've got Snippet Box, we've got Flame, and we've got Authelia set up there. So the next thing we want to do is actually start implementing our actual security, our additional layer of authentication. So in order to set up our additional layer of authentication here, what we're going to do is we're going to go over here. We're going to start with auth.dbtech.tips because this is going to be different than all of our other subdomains. So we're going to come into here. We're going to click Edit. We went to those three little dots over here. We're going to click that. We're going to click Edit. And then we're going to come over here across the top and click on Advanced. And this is where things can go a little wonky if you're not careful. So I'm going to come back over to here. And in fact, what I want to do, just because it'll be easier to take a look at, is we're going to put this in. So this is what we're going to put into this Advanced tab on the Authelia subdomain in NGINX Proxy Manager. So what we want to do is take a look at this upstream Authelia. What we want to do is make sure that this IP address actually matches the IP address of our server, of our Authelia server. So I'm going to change this to 69.106. And we're going to make sure that we leave that port as 9091. Again, if you changed it in your initial setup, change it here as well. And then basically all of this other stuff, really, you can more or less leave the same until you get down to here, into this area right here. This is for reverse proxies, specifically dealing with CloudFlare. What you're going to want to do is make sure that this set real IP from matches your network configuration. So my typical network configuration, I've got this server that we're working on a separate VLAN, but my typical network configuration is this. So I'm just going to leave it as that. But if you've got, 10.0.0.1 or whatever, make sure to fill this in appropriately right here. So just using 10.0.0.1 as an example, it would be 10.0.0.0/24. That's what you would use for that setup. Again, I'm not using that, so that's not going to be what I use. But basically everything else in here is good to go. So we can copy this and then just paste this in here and click Save. And then nothing here should have changed because that was just a configuration to make other things work in the background. So in order to set up our other subdomains, what we're going to do is we're going to use a different configuration in there, and it's going to be, I'm going to paste it into here as well. Again, because this one's a little longer and a little more in depth as far as what's going on here, and you'll really need to make sure that you pay attention to each of these different settings that I'm going to change. Otherwise, it just won't work. You'll get errors. Things won't work. It'll be a nightmare. So first thing we want to do, again, is change this to whatever your upstream Authelia is. So again, I'm going to do 69.106. Again, I'm pulling that from up here. Below that, we're going to scroll down a little bit. Like all of this is still all the same until we get to our location here. So this is one of those cases of you're going to need to pay attention to this set upstream, and then underscore, and then that next little spot right here where it says, in this case, uptime Kuma, that is going to be the container name that you're trying to secure. So in this case, let's do flame first, our flame.db-tech.tips. So in this case, it'll be flame, like so. And where I'm actually pulling that from is this name right here in Portainer. That's the container name that we're going to use there. So if I come back over to here, I want to make sure that it's upstream underscore flame. And then what we're going to do is do the same thing right here, like that. There are some notes in here that we can take out that will kind of help us make more sense, or maybe not make more sense, but will make it easier to read. So we want to make sure that we give this a different name for each of our different containers, just so that it can differentiate what you're trying to do there. The other thing that you could do realistically, if you wanted to, if you didn't want to mess with it, you could just manually type in your IP address and port of that container. You could do that. And in fact, I've done that to give access to things on other hardware that wasn't running in Docker. For instance, I wanted to give access to my MB server. So I put in my MB server IP address as well as the port right here, and then it worked. So you can authenticate things that are not in Docker. If you have their IP address and required ports, you can actually put those in right there. The other thing that we want to do is take a look a little further down. All of this down here is fine, but we do want to make sure that we change this. This will be whatever your Authelia URL is. So for me, it'll be auth.db-tech.tips, like so. And then we can scroll down and just make sure that there's nothing else here. Again, we want to make sure down here at the bottom that we get this real IP, whatever your network setup is, like we did in the Authelia configuration. You'll want to match that here as well. So really all we've done is we've kind of added some stuff here in the middle that is subdomain specific for the domain that we're trying to set up. So once we've got this set up, we should be able to come over to here, copy all of this. Then we're going to come back over to NGINX Proxy Manager. We're going to go to Flame. We're going to click the three dots. We'll click Edit. We're going to go to Advanced, and we're going to paste that in there. We're going to click Save. So if we click this right here and everything works correctly, we should actually get our Authelia login screen, just like so. So I'm going to type in db-tech. Oops, I'm going to type it correctly, though. And I'm going to type in my password. Of course, I just set this as password. And there we go. Now we've got this additional level of security. So now we've set up Authelia to help protect flame.db-tech.tips. So let's do that again. This time we're going to do it over here for snippet box. So we're going to come back over here. We're going to grab snippet.db-tech.tips right here. We're going to edit this. Oops. We're going to click edit like I mean to. We're going to go to advanced. And then what we're going to do is really all we have to do, once we've done this once, really all we need to do at this point is come back over here to where we've got this upstream underscore flame, and just come over to here and find our container name, like so, and then change it right here. So we're going to replace flame, like so. All of this other stuff in here should be fine. So we're going to grab this, and we're going to come back over here to NGINX Proxy Manager. We're going to paste that in and click Save. Now, if everything works as it should, because we've already authenticated on the server, when I click Snippet, it should just take me to that home page, just like that. Very, very smooth. Now, let's do this again, except this time, let's open it in an incognito window. So this time, if I do that, now I have to log in again. So I'm going to do db-tech, password, and then it logged me in and redirected me. Now, again, I'm logged in on the server. I've authenticated that it's okay for me to be on this server. So what I can do then is flame.db-tech.tips, and then it's going to immediately log me in because I've already authenticated with the server. So basically at this point, what you can do is set up all of your subdomains the way I showed in this video, and then kind of go through that process of setting up all of those subdomains the same way using like in the on the website that you'll have access to for this tutorial. It'll be the protected domain conf file. Once you've got that set up once, it's just a matter of kind of editing that one line that is specific to the container that you're trying to access. Again, this is something that's been asked for, honestly, for more than a year, getting Authelia set up. And the reality is I wasn't comfortable setting it up because I don't like using traffic, again, for my setup, because I've got containers all over different hardware, VMs, all kinds of stuff. And traffic doesn't play nice with that because of their labeling system in order to work. So I wanted to make sure that I had a good, solid setup for using Authelia with NGINX Proxy Manager. I recently got it figured out after watching, honestly, I watched videos in like 4 different languages and took all the information I could and put it together, and here we are. So hopefully you'll find this video helpful. If you did, it would really mean a lot to me if you give the video a thumbs up, just to let me know that the video was helpful. As I mentioned throughout this video, all of the resources that you'll need will be available in the description down below so that you can kind of copy and paste some of this and not have to type it out or follow along with what was on the screen and try to retype all of that. Everything will be available in the description, so definitely check that out. While you're down there, if you found this video exceptionally helpful, there are some different ways that you can support the channel, whether it's through PayPal or Coffee or Patreon or whatever the case is. Of course, you don't have to. It's just one of those things you could do if you felt the desire to do that. So, oh man, long video. I only kind of apologize for that. We had a lot to cover. With that being said, though, I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. So as always, thanks for your time. I always appreciate your support, and I'll talk to you in the next video.